Hello, folks. Welcome to Storytelling Association of California's genre storytelling series. Tonight is Legends, Urban, and Traditional. For those of you that don't recognize me, I don't live in Colorado. I don't live in California. I'm here in just outside of Denver, Colorado. My name's Cooper Brown. I got brought in for a genre storytelling show last summer, I think. I've done one since then, and I got asked to come MC tonight. So that's what I'm doing here tonight, and I'm really happy to be here. Our tech for the evening is Pakradi Agravla. I'm sorry, I am butchering your name. Agraval, I'm sorry. And I am so grateful for her help. She's been doing amazing work here. Usually I'm running tech for my shows, and it's so lovely to have someone who knows what they're doing. So thank you. For those of you who are new to Zoom or just need a reminder, right now you're looking at me because I've been spotlit. I'm in speaker mode. If you would like to look at the whole audience, as it were, if you go up to that right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little button that says View. If you click on that button, if you click Gallery, you can see the whole room, as it were, which is one of the reasons that I really like being here in a Zoom meeting, is that we can see everybody's faces. On that note, if you're comfortable turning on your cameras, it's great for the tellers to be able to see faces in the little boxes up at the top or people looking at. So it's lovely. If you're comfortable turning on your cameras, please do so. If you would like subtitles, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there are 3 dots, and if you click on those, there's an option that says captions, and if you click on captions, you can click show captions, and so there's a real-time captioning if you would like subtitles. If you're on an iPad, you have to go to the More option in the upper right-hand corner, then select Meeting Options, and then Captions. So that's the order there. Because we're doing storytelling on Zoom, we're going to ask everybody to be muted while a teller is telling. When a teller is done telling, that spotlight will remove, and at that point we will ask folks to unmute themselves to give their applause. If American Sign Language is better for you, this is applause in American Sign Language. So give the tellers what you feel, because it's going to be a really, really great lineup tonight. And then at the end of that, we will mute everybody again. So, someone's dog barking or putting down a glass, we don't all hear it. On that note, there is a chat option. One of the things we love about Zoom is that we can chat. We do ask that folks don't chat during stories, because if chat pops up and you're on an iPad or a phone, it pops up right on top of the screen. Or if you're on a computer, if you ever see my eyes flick over to the side, what's happening is chat is popping up and my eyes are being drawn to that. However, there are a couple of storytellers that have asked for a 2-minute warning, so you may see a 2-minute warning pop up in there from me. So that's what that's about. Okay, that all out of the way, I would love to welcome our first storyteller of the evening up here with me. This is Marty Falshore, who is our out-of-state guest teller for the evening from the Seattle Storytellers Guild, joining us from Ellensburg, Washington. Marty started her storytelling journey using stories as teaching aids, and then took the plunge like so many folks did during lockdown and those early days of COVID, where we were all on Zoom and there were suddenly all of these story sharing circles that it didn't matter where on earth you were. You could just log in. As a child, Marty would go out of her way not to tell a lie, but now tall tales are her favorite genre of story, so I'm not exactly sure what that says, but I'm really, really glad to welcome Marty Falshore. Take it away.
Thank you very much for that. They call me the big bad wolf. Well, let me tell you. There's a lot wrong with that. For one thing, I'm not big. I'm kind of average sized, maybe even a little small. Plus, I'm a really good wolf. You can tell, maybe not by my girth, that it's barely spring and I'm already ready for winter. I can hunt. And of course, I'm a wolf. So I hunt, I eat meat. And that's not what I'm here to tell you about. I'm here to tell you about the 3 little pigs, because you've heard that story, I'm sure, but that's the pig's version. And it's really not the truth. This is what really happened. I was hungry. So I went sniffing for dinner. And what did I find but pig? And let me tell you, I love pig. From the snout to the tail, from the feet to the back, the whole thing, especially bacon. I just love pig. So I followed the trail and I came to this straw house. Now, who makes a house out of straw? I mean, really. So I do like to be polite to my dinner, so I knocked on the door and I said, little pig, would you please let me come in? And you know what that little snot said? That little pig said, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Well, that ticked me off. So I said, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, which really didn't take much huffing or puffing because it was straw. I could have snapped my fingers and it would have gone. The straw all flew, no pig. It got away. So I followed its trail and I came across a stick house, and in that stick house, there were two little pigs, and we all know two is better than one. So again, I knocked on the door. I was sort of starting to drool. I was so hungry and so ready for two little pigs. Little pigs, please let me come in. And those little snots said, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Well, that really got me mad. So I said, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. A little harder this time. When all the sticks flew and the pigs were gone. I gotta remember to look for a back door before I huff and I puff and blow the house down. So I start sniffing again and I follow those two pigs' trail and I come to this brick house. It's kind of a nice house, got a nice wooden door, some windows. The windows have bars on them, so I'm not getting in that way. And I bang on the door. Gotta clean up my face. Little pigs, let me come in. And what do you think those little pigs said? Not what the other one said. This one pig said, yeah, I assume it's the last pig. Yeah, we'll let you come in if you can answer this riddle. A riddle, huh? I kind of like riddles. I can think. Okay, what's the riddle? What has four wheels and flies? 4 wheels and flies. While I'm thinking, I'm also walking around looking for exits for the pigs, and I'm thinking about everything I know that has wheels. There's cars, 4 wheels. There's cars, but they don't fly. Trucks, they don't fly. Airplanes, they only got 3 wheels. Wheelbarrows, 1 wheel. So then I switched to things that fly. And there's airplanes, but they only got 3 wheels. There's birds, no wheels. Butterflies, no wheels. Other insects, no wheels. By now, I'm at the front of the house again. And I tell them I'm gonna huff and I'll puff. And next thing I know, I'm being jostled along in the back of a truck in a cage. I can't get out. I try gnawing. I can't get out of the cage, and we're jostling along until they stop. And these 2 men in green suits, I think they're green. I'm a wolf. I don't see color real well. I think it's green suits. These 2 men get out and pull me out of the back of the truck, set me on the ground, and sorry, something just happened. Set me on the ground, open the cage. They run back into the truck like I'm going to get them. And I get out and I run. And this is an area I've never seen before. All the smells are new, all the sounds are new. And I've been here a while now, and all there is to eat are things like rodents, voles, and mice, and rabbits. And there's birds now and then, snakes now and then, but there's not a single pig here. Plus, these guys in green keep bringing other critters here. There's been a bear and another wolf and a cougar, and we all got together, and I figured out that what happened was, while I was trying to figure out the joke, the riddle, those little pigs were calling somebody to come get me and take me someplace else where there aren't any pigs, far away from where I used to live. No pigs, just rodent kind of things. And the worst part, besides the fact that there are no pigs, the worst part is I never found out the answer to the riddle. Does anybody know? Nobody knows? Okay, it's a garbage truck. 4 wheels, flies, garbage truck. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for getting us started, Marty. For those of you that don't know, I host a show called Fairy Tale Variations, and I always love people playing with old stories. And right now, we're starting to re-release Wolves in Colorado, so that was really lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks for getting us started here. I would like to welcome up our next teller of the evening, Aunt Leanne of the Storytellers of San Diego, joining us from Vista, California. Now, Aunt Leanne tells me that 16 years ago, she woke up, shoved her beloved awake, and spoke those fateful words, "I want to be a storyteller," to which he replied, "You already are." And I would like to imagine he then tried to roll over and go back to sleep. But you'll have to fill me in on that part of the story. With a lifelong love of folk and fairy tales, Aunt Leanne has always been drawn to the possibility of the seemingly impossible. Now, Aunt Leanne is not only a storyteller, she is a clinical herbalist, and I assume this is probably related, teaches classes on whiskey appreciation. So you and I need to talk more when we're in the same area. So on that note, please help me welcome Aunt Leanne.
Thank you so much, Cooper. Yes, related or not, we'll talk. We'll talk about it. Leah Luachra was glaring at her beloved. Leah Luachra, the gray one, the gray warrior, whose very name made her enemies' blood run as ice through their hearts, was glaring. She had spent most of her life among the violence of men, in war, in mercenary actions. But the day she had met Bodmal, her opposite in every way, a healer, blonde, gentle, and kind, and her match in every way. And even more important, the day that they had found the land where they could build a home together, far up, hidden in the mountains, away from the rest of humanity. That was the first peace that Leah Luachra had ever known in her life. And Bodmal was trying to ruin it. Myrna cannot keep the child unless you want my nephew's death on your conscience. We will need to take him. We can raise him. Leah Luachra had never thought there was even a possibility of children. She and Bodmal preferred the company of women in their lives and in their bed generally, and each other more specifically. And here she was, suggesting that they take a child into their home. Her sister, Myrna, was begging as well. Please, Grey One, the people who killed his father will come back for him. And Bodmal was no dummy. She was holding the babe she had bathed and fed and wrapped, and nothing could look more angelic. But Leah Luachra growled at the bundle. But Werna and Bodmal together were an unstoppable force, and the old grey warrior knew when she was beaten. What will you tell people, Werna? I'll tell them that I have hidden him somewhere safe. You'd best be off and not make a liar out of me. The three women embraced. But Leah Luachra felt the sword that was never far from her side being lifted out of the scabbard. The three women glanced down and gasped. It was Jamie's chubby white hand pulling at the sword. The grey warrior threw back her head and laughed. Patience, young one. I will teach you the sword when you are ready. And with that, they were off to the mountain. Leah Luachra doubled back often to erase all signs of their passing and to dispatch a son of Gol or a man of Morn. But when at last it seemed they had no followers, they headed up the mountain toward home. Why, Grey One, why? Why can't you teach me the sword? She had heard it over and over. I will teach you when you're ready today. You must watch the fox until sundown. But why? It's bad enough that Auntie teaches me how to make medicine out of plants, insists I darn my socks and wash the pots. Someday you may only have your own company, and you won't want to be a disappointment to your future self. Leah Luachra would not tell the lad, but he did a fair impression of her partner. Why must I watch the fox? You will tell me yourself at sundown. And when she returned, he did. Oh, Grey One, the fox is not just cunning. They can slide through the grass without moving a blade. I practiced all day with them until I could do the same. But they play with their kits. Can I learn the sword tomorrow? Not tomorrow. The hawk tomorrow. And so it went, the hawk, the carp, the salmon, and every day. Why? Why can't I learn the sword? Losing patience, she walked to the largest tree in their grove and cut a switch. She handed it to the boy, who looked at that stick with suspicion. She cut one for herself. She'd used this exercise on many young warriors in her care, though most were at least 3 times the age of this one. We will race around the tree, and I will try to strike you with as many blows as I can, and you will try to strike me. You can call a halt at any time you want, and so can I, but we will keep score week to week. And when you can match me, then you will be ready. And so they did. They raced around the tree, and when she had struck him 10 times and he had not even put a glancing blow on her shoulder, she called a halt. But to her surprise, the boy loved the game. She could use it to bribe him to do the other exercises. Meditation and forms. A warrior must train mind and body. Today you'll go and you'll watch the wolf. But one day, as they ran around the tree, Leah Luachra counted 20, 40, 60 blows on the lad and 60 blows on her own back. When she called a halt, she said, "Let us go and tell your auntie." But Bodmal, in that witchy way she had, seemed to know already. She greeted them at the door with a sword, the finest in all Ireland, or at least this part of it. And the boy took to it like a duck to water, as she had known he would, the finest student she had ever had. And it wasn't long before Bodmal and Leah Luacra decided together it was time for Fionn. For that was his name now, Blonde One. Fionn must go back and retake his place in the world. If you hadn't known better, as his foster mothers stood to wave him goodbye, you would have thought there were tears in Leah Luacra's eyes as well as Bodmal's. And as she called down to him, as he rode off with that sword on his horse, "Your name is Finn, son of Cool MacTrevor. You tell them you already can match the Grey Warrior, and you'll do great things. Make a name for yourself, lad. Become a legend." And he did. For those were the foster mothers of Finn McCool. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Aunt Leanne. I grew up on those stories. That was lovely to hear. Thank you so much. I would like to invite our next teller up. Adrian Lowry is of the Inland Valley Storytellers, joining us from sunny Riverside, California. Adrian got her official start in storytelling 14 years ago after attending the Solstice Music and Storytelling Festival in Malibu, and then joining the Inland Valley Storytellers that same year and telling with them every year since at the spring concert and fall celebration. Well done. Adrian tells me that she has had lunch with Jesus and his mother Mary together, having covered the Passion Play in Bavaria for the LA Times. Wild weeks of Passion Play. Perhaps this corresponds with her love of Celtic folklore and the things that happen at that thinnest place where the earthly and the spiritual meet and the veil is thin. So please welcome Adrian to our virtual stage. You're going to need to unmute yourself.
Well, thank you. I am so glad to share a legend with you that is this not from Ireland, but another place where the veil is thin between humanity and the other world. So many of you may have traveled to Hawaii and enjoyed that scenic highway and all the vistas and such. And if you've been to Honolulu, you have no doubt heard of the Pali Highway, which takes travelers to the Pali Lookout. This location, back in the 17th century, was the scene of an intense battle, and it may have been a place throughout time for our lovers' trysts and subsequent suicides of unrequited or betrayed lovers. It's also a piece of highway that is frequented by the volcano goddess Pele, sorry, as well as the Mohoahini, a grotesque lizard-like creature with the ability to transform into a beautiful woman. Sorry. Some of you may, I'm not sure what's happening, hang on. Sorry. Some of you may have visited haunted Hawaii sites with a consummate guide, Lopaka Kapanuai, and it is his encounter with At the Pali Lookout that I share with you as a bit of a cautionary tale with a twist. You see, many years ago, as a high schooler, Lopaka and his friends, Sean and Ted, decided it was a perfect time to cut school one beautiful spring afternoon. They ran through a drive-through for all the essential food supplies and picked up Ted's girlfriend, Tracy, and headed out on the Pali Highway to the lookout. While Ted and Tracy began making out, Sean and Lopaka excused themselves and went walking toward the lookout. And that's when they saw the lower path, which leads further down. So they decided to follow it just to see how far it went. The ginger plants were in bloom and the fragrance was amazing. And as they got further down the path, the winds were becoming stronger. You see, this was a meeting place of both the leeward and the windward winds. And as they met at the peak there, the winds became very strong, very loud. They came around a bend, and suddenly all sound stopped. The wind was still moving the trees, but no sound, no birds. Looking out toward the water, that's when they heard it. The voice of a girl their age calling out Sean's name. Sean? 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 The two boys looked at each other and looked around. They thought maybe Ted had gotten behind them somehow, was punking them. But no, the voice was all around them and in front of them. Then the voice went crazy and began shouting Sean's name in rapid succession, louder and louder. Sean, 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 Sean. And it grew to a frenzied pitch, truly sounding unhinged. Did you hear that? They said simultaneously. And there was dead silence all of a sudden. All noise was gone. Then they heard the girl's voice say just once, Lopaka. How did the disembodied voice know their names? Sean stood with his back to the ocean, facing Lopaka, whose back was to the path behind them. And in that moment, Sean's chin went down, his shoulders hunched, and he football tackled Lopaka out of the way, knocking him to the ground, and took off running. Picking himself up off the ground, he was too scared to be hurt, even though he was scraped up and bleeding. He ran after Sean, and when he caught up to him, they got into a big fight. Lopaka was not so much mad or hurt, he felt betrayed. Sean had left him behind. Ted broke up the fight, and needless to say, on the way home, the two shaken boys didn't say a word to each other. Their friendship grew distant, and as they went their separate ways, it wasn't until March of 2006, nearly 26 years later, that Lopaka got a call one afternoon. The caller ID said unknown. And as he answered it, the voice on the other side said, "This is Sean." And after a pause, Lopaka replied, "Dude, where have you been? I tried contacting you years ago. You just fell off the map. What's up, man?" "Take this address down," he monotoned. "Meet me tomorrow at noon." And then he hung up. Well, the address was for the home that Sean had grown up in, and Lopaka had spent a lot of time there as well. At the specified time the next day, Lopaka arrived. Sean led him to an enclosed patio, and Sean turned on the interior fluorescent lights, you know, those ones that sort of crackle and pop and blink before they go on, but really bright. He didn't bother getting up to offer his guest, "Hey, man, nice to see you," whatever. Instead, he gestured to a chair that wasn't far from him, and he sat. He pulled up closer to Sean, and he didn't appear to be bothered by it, so Sean began, "You remember that day when we went to the Poly and walked down that empty road?" "Yeah." "Remember how we heard the voice call my name, and then it called your name?" He looked at Lopaka for some kind of confirmation. "Yeah," Lopaka answered. "I remember. And I knocked you down and ran away. Remember that?" "Yes." Lopaka was irritated now with all the questions that were in his mind ever since then. "What's this all about?" "You never wondered why I knocked you down," Sean said. "Well, yeah, all the time." "When the voice called your name, a Hawaiian girl appeared from behind you with pale skin and long dark hair. He was going over the details so we wouldn't miss anything. She didn't have any clothes on, and her hands were wrapped around your shoulders. She was looking at you like a meal, and I could see her eyes were black, and a forked tongue came out of her mouth. So when I pushed you out of the way, the spirit of the Hawaiian girl jumped on me, and she's been with me ever since. What? Is this what he brought Lopaka here for? To tell him this far-fetched story? Sean continued. The entire week after they went to the poly, the Hawaiian girl's spirit would appear outside of Sean's window. Outside his bedroom window every night, knocking on the glass. Again and again. And every time he'd open the drapes, she'd point at the screen. She wanted him to let her in. He always shook his head no. Finally, at the end of the week, he said, when she appeared outside my window, demanding to be let in, and I refused her again, she took her long finger, rubbed it across the screen slowly, and the hook that held the screen to the windowsill came undone. She pulled the screen back and climbed in. That's the last thing I remember, Sean said. I woke up and it was morning, but I haven't been the same since. Silence allowed Lopaka a second or more to take in everything. Looking carefully at Sean, he didn't know how he'd missed it. If what he said was true, this thing with the Hawaiian girl's ghost or spirit really messed up his life. It showed in his face. Why tell me all this now? Do you see how well lit this patio is? Sean asked without answering the question. Yeah. Do you see that in that corner behind me to the right? How it's dark, even though there's a light shining on it. Yeah, that's strange. And Lopaka could see it was a shadow of a human figure. What is that? That's her, said Sean. She's still with me. She never left. You see, you've changed. You're not the same person you were in high school, especially since that day. Me, I'm still Sean from March 1980. She won't let me be anything but this. Sean put his head down, hiding his face, waved goodbye, and gestured for Lopaka to leave. Half unsure at first, that dark, lingering presence in the corner, well, he didn't want to stay any longer than he had to. Later, as Lopaka asked his mother about this, she smiled and said, oh, it was a Mahawahini, there to pull a lover into the sea. She could have taken me, Lopaka exclaimed. His mother smiled again. If it was your time, she said, you would not still be here. 10 years later, in 2016, Lopaka drove by Sean's house, but it was gone, with the new house standing on top of the foundation of what was once Sean's boyhood domicile. He couldn't help but wonder if the spirit or ghost of the Hawaiian girl from the poly went with Sean, or if she decided to stay where she was. Hawaii is a small community. If anything, word will get around, and they'll know either way.
Oh. Oh, that was lovely. I was waiting. I was waiting. I love myth and legend, but I am not a teller of urban legends, but I do love hearing them. So thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was delightful. So our next teller of the evening is Michael D. McCarty. That's McCarty, not McCarthy, as he will tell you. He is the Regional Gem recipient joining us from Blythe, California, where he is giving his story creation workshop at Ironwood State Prison. This man does amazing work. And I first met Michael at the National Storytelling Conference in 2017, and this is a man preceded by his laugh. And I remember sitting in that first opening, the first opening keynote, and I could hear him, and I knew I had to meet this man. Michael is an amazing teller. He's been at this for over 30 years, and he got his start when he met the great Joel Ben Izzy at the Conference on Jewish Education in 1992. And he picked Joel's brain and says that he's been running his mouth ever since. And I feel that you were probably running your mouth well before that, maybe just not professionally.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you say that your mother would tell us that you've been a storyteller your whole life long. So please help me to welcome the man with the laugh, Michael D. McCarty.
Yes, indeed. Greetings and salutations, y'all. The story I'm going to share with you is a story I found in a collection called Children of Wax by Alexander McCall Smith. The story is called The Blind Man's Bird. Once, in a village in Zimbabwe, there was a young man and there was a young woman, and they fell in love and were married. They loved each other. Things were wonderful. The young woman had an older brother who had been born blind. The young man took to his brother-in-law quickly. He liked to hang out with him. He liked to hear his stories. He liked to hear his wisdom. One day, he says to his brother-in-law, "Brother, I'm going to go hunting for birds tomorrow. Would you like to go hunting with me?" Well, of course, no one had ever asked the blind man to go hunting with him in his life. So he was, yes, yes. Oh, thank you, yes. So the next morning they set out and they walked for some time. They walked for some time until they found an area, a clearing. And the young man set up 2 traps for the birds. He set up the first trap and told the blind man, "This trap will be yours. Whatever bird comes will be the bird for you." And then he went a little farther and set up a trap for himself. They went back to their village. And then early the next morning, they set back to check their traps. The blind man was excited. He said to his young brother-in-law, brother, I'm sure that we both have birds in our traps." And he was right. However, the bird in his trap, the most beautiful bird the young man had ever seen, feathers every color of the rainbow. It was just an amazingly beautiful bird. The bird in his trap, plain old bird. What you want of a bird? Brown bird. That's all I could do. And then the young man thought, he won't know the difference, because he wanted to give the beautiful bird to his wife. Now, the blind man had a wife. She could see, she would have loved those feathers, but that was not in the young man's mind. So he switched the birds. He gave the blind man the plain bird and took the beautiful bird for himself. The blind man took the bird. He pet the bird. He listened to the bird. They walked back towards their village in silence for some time. And the young man said, brother, I have a question. It's been bothering me, and perhaps you can share your insight and wisdom. Why do men fight with each other? Why do men go to war with each other? They walked in silence for a few steps, and the blind man said, men fight with each other. They go to war with each other because they do to each other what you have just done to me. Busted by the blind man. Busted by the blind man. Like I said, he couldn't see, but he could hear. The young man was mortified. He apologized profusely. He exchanged the birds and continued to apologize. And then they walked for some time in silence. After a while, the young man said, brother, how do men make amends with each other when they have wronged each other? And he said, they do what you have just done. They right the wrong. And that's the end of that.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
My pleasure.
That's good wisdom. Thank you. This has been a lovely, the breadth of stories we've had tonight has been just amazing, and we get more. Oh, thank you. Our next teller is David Schmidt of the Storytellers of San Diego, who is joining us tonight from Mexico City, where he says he now spends most of his time. So welcome. David has been a lover of stories since the campfire tales as a Boy Scout, the cassette tapes of David Holt and J. O'Callahan, and I grew up on those as well. And his Aunt Janet's horrifying urban legends. So I don't know what we're going to get tonight. David is a collector of stories himself, most recently searching out modern legends of the Proctor Valley monster, a Bigfoot-type creature that lurks around Chula Vista. The Storytellers of San Diego will soon be performing some of these legends this fall, thanks to a generous grant from the Rebecca Fund. So please stay tuned for that. You can read about the Proctor Valley monster in David's most recent book of Southern California legends, Haunted Temecula Valley, Giants, Gnomes, and Hairy Men. So please, welcome David Schmidt.
If you ever go out to Proctor Valley, well, you better not go at night. There's things in there, and them old hills make a grown man die of fright. There are certain places in this world that just seem to attract strange, unusual activity. Certain places that challenge all of our assumptions about what we think we know. There's things that walk, things that crawl, things that creep along on the ground. One of those places is very close to San Diego, California, just south, and Chula Vista and Bonita, California, just east of those towns in the wilderness known as Proctor Valley. And they say that a big old hairy beast gets up and he walks around. But I couldn't believe it. I just had to find out for myself. I couldn't conceive it. I never would listen to nobody else. I couldn't believe it. I just had to find out for myself. There's some things in this world you just can't explain. Now that's the country song that was playing on the radio when Nancy and 4 of her friends from soccer practice, they were all driving from high school. Nancy was driving everybody home, and it was one of those winter evenings when the sun starts to set super early. In fact, sun was already setting as they were driving out into suburban Chula Vista. Nancy, she was the smartest kid in her class, probably the smartest kid in the whole high school. And so she was the most mature one. She was also the only friend of their group from soccer who had a car. It was an old car, didn't work that well. I mean, the passenger side door, you had to open it from the outside. It wouldn't open from the inside. But she was the only one who had a car, so the others couldn't be picky. So they were always hitting her up for rides. Just like this day, after soccer practice, they're in the car, and the car had smelled like grass and sweat and cleats, and the girls are all talking about school. And Nancy's driving them out into the the new developments just east of Chula Vista on the far end of town. Used to be all wilderness. And they're going to drop off Amy, her BFF, that's youth for best friend forever. Amy was sitting in the passenger side, and Nancy was going to drop her off first. Amy lived at the furthest edge of town. And so they're driving, and then Amy asked Nancy, she said, "Hey, did you get the homework from Mr. Winter's class?" Nancy, because she's the smartest and the most mature, she's always losing her patience with her friends. She says, "Are you kidding? None of you picked up the handout?" And all the girls shook their heads. "All right, I've got it here in my pocket." And Nancy, she pulled out the handout for Mr. Winters. She said, "All right, this is what we've got to write tonight." She says, "Write an essay if you agree or disagree." And it's a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson. "Some places speak distinctly. Certain dark gardens cry aloud for a murder. Certain old houses demand to be haunted. Certain coasts are set for a shipwreck." Oh, the girls in the back, they said, "Oh, that's a morbid quote. That's kind of dark." And Amy said, you know what, Mr. Winters, he's been in a dark mood lately because he's going through a divorce. I think he's in a nasty mood. Everybody notices that. And the girls kind of laughed. And then Amy said, you know what, that quote, it kind of reminds me of Proctor Valley Road. Now, one of the girls in the back, she looked out the window at the street sign they were passing. She said, what do you mean? We're on Proctor Valley Road. There's nothing weird about this road. And then the other girls kind of agreed, but Amy said, no, 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 I don't mean this part of Proctor Valley Road. I mean when you follow it further out into the hills, that part where it's all dirt and wilderness. I mean that part of Proctor Valley Road. Don't you guys remember the stories? And they start to remember these stories, and Nancy, because she's the smartest and the most mature in her class, she gets exasperated. She's just thinking to herself, oh, they're going to start with this nonsense again. And so one of the girls says, yeah, you know, I've heard there's this monster out there. It's like 7 or 8 feet tall. It's all covered in long hair, and it's not human. It's lived out there for hundreds of years. And Nancy's just thinking to herself, she's biting her tongue, but she's thinking, that's just the old Bigfoot legend. There's nothing original about that. And then one of the other girls, she says, yeah, you know, I've heard the creature has horns. He has horns so he can disguise himself out with the cattle and the ranches out there. And Nancy thinks, now you're mixing it up with a Minotaur legend. And then another girl says, yeah, you know, I heard the monster, he attacks the cattle sometimes. He leaves all their guts hanging out and he sucks the blood out of them. And Nancy says, now you're thinking of the Chupacabras legend. And then another girl says, well, I heard that the monster, he can affect electronics and make your radio and things not work. And Nancy, she speaks out loud. She says, that's UFOs you're thinking of. You guys can't tell me you actually believe any of that crap. And the girls kind of got quiet. And then Amy said, well, you sound pretty sure of yourself, Nancy. And Nancy said, yeah, I'm sure there's not a monster with magical powers living out in the wilderness just east of Chula Vista, California. Yeah, you don't have to be a genius to know that. Amy said, okay, why don't we try it out? Try it out like what? Well, where are we going to set up traps, monster traps? Amy says, no, we can go out there. There's something we can do to test it, Amy says. See, the legends say that you can make the monster come to you if you drive your car out there, turn off the engine, turn off all the lights, and just wait there in the dark. And it's almost dark already. We can test it. And the other girls in the back, one of them said, I don't know if this is such a good idea. And Nancy said, relax. We're going to go test it. We'll do it right now. I'll prove to you this monster does not exist. We're going to go do the whole test. And then after that, I don't want to hear any of you talking about a monster out on Proctor Valley Road. So they did. They drove past Amy's house and drove further down Proctor Valley Road, further and further, and real soon you get past that suburban part, and then it's all potholes, and your car starts to jiggle violently, and as they're driving, the radio starts cutting in and out once they get to that potholey dirt part of the road, and that same song just starts cutting out. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't be. Hell, if I couldn't conceive. Never would listen to nobody, believe it, never would nobody. And then the radio just cuts out and goes silent. Well, they drove down that dirt road. Finally, Nancy said, I don't think my shocks can handle this road much. I'm going to have to stop here. Amy said, well, okay, it's close enough. We've gone far enough, I think. But you know what? Amy said, you should turn the car around. Turn it around so we have a quick getaway, just in case. Oh, my God. Okay, fine, Nancy says. We'll turn it around. And then she parked the car. She rolled her window down, and she said, all right, Proctor Valley Monster, here we are. Come and get it. And then she turned off all the lights, turned off the headlights, and they sat there. And the girls, they were sort of joking around for a while. One of the girls in the back, she made some joke about maybe the monster's feeling extra horny tonight because it's like a minotaur. And they're making corny high school jokes like that. But after a while, they kind of stopped, and they just sat there in the silence. And Nancy, she realized out here is just pitch black. You can't see the city lights at all. You feel like you're 100 miles from the city. It's just blackness, and you can hear every cricket chirping. You could hear every owl hooting out there. You could even hear a coyote kind of howling way off in the distance. And they sat there for a while, and they got quieter and quieter. And eventually, Nancy, she saw a light in her rearview mirror because one of the girls in the back, she pulled her cell phone out. The girl said, oh, I still don't have any reception out here. Can we go already? This is boring. Nancy said, wait, shut up, listen. I don't hear anything. Listen, shut up. And Nancy looked in her rearview mirror and she saw something on the road, some dark figure on the road, and it seemed to be getting bigger. And then she could hear that pat, 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 pat. Footsteps on the gravel, pat, pat, pat. But somebody running just at a breakneck sprint. And the girls, all the girls turned around eventually. They looked back there. What is that? Is that a man? Is something that's getting closer and closer, and it's sure tall like a man. It's walking on two legs like a man, but it's not walking. It's running, and it's running at a sprint, and it's coming toward their car, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's way too tall to be a man as it gets closer. So Amy says, Nancy, turn the car on, turn it on. And Nancy, she turns the key, and it's not, the ignition, it's not coming on. Why does this always happen at the worst time? And she's trying to get the car started. The girls are all screaming. Finally, Amy just starts pulling at her. She's hysterical, pulling at the door handle. Let me out, let me out. She's saying, let me out of here. And Nancy's like, just let me get it started. Finally, room. And the engine starts and she just steps on the gas and just peeled out of there, big cloud of dust behind them. But she looked up in that rearview mirror and she could have sworn she saw some figure way too tall to be a man standing there in the road behind them. Well, she drove as fast as she could on that bumpy road. Finally, she got to the paved part of the road. And they drove back into suburbia, where everything's predictable and normal and nice again. All the street lights and all the big McMansions out there. And she drove Amy home first, and they went to Amy's house. And already as they got there, Nancy, she's starting to think maybe she didn't see what she thought she saw. Maybe it was all in her imagination. But of course, she had to get out of the car to go open Amy's door on the passenger side. So she got out and she walked around the back of the car and she screamed when she looked at the back of the car and she saw deep claw marks in the metal and the bumper on the back of her car. Now, you might not believe this story. I can't show you Nancy's car. I can't show you the claw marks. But there is something you can see for yourself. If you're ever around San Diego or Chula Vista, California, you can go down to the Bonita Museum, and framed at the entrance to the Bonita Museum, they have a plaster cast of a very strange footprint that some people say was the creature's footprint taken years ago out in Proctor Valley. I don't know what made that footprint, but if you look at it, it's one thing for sure. It's definitely not human. There's some things in this world we just can't explain. I couldn't believe it. I just had to find out for myself. I couldn't conceive it. I never would listen to nobody else. I couldn't believe it. Oh, I just had to find out for myself. There's some things in this world we can't explain. Oh yeah, there's some things in this world we can't explain. The Proctor Valley Monster.
Oh, more good urban legends. Thank you so much, David. That was delightful. All right, our penultimate teller of the evening is Peter Severnin, and I think I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry. From Story Masters in Los Angeles. Now, growing up in the Netherlands, Peter had the fortune of being told stories by his parents every day and his grandmother every Sunday afternoon. Any story was fine, literary, biblical legends, fairy tales. And when he had children of his own, he carried on that tradition. That's good work. Now, in his 80s, Peter is feeling that life may be short and everything is relative, nothing is that important, so you might as well laugh and enjoy the moment to the fullest. So let's enjoy it with him. Here he is.
The Nanai peoples live in the Amur Valley region of eastern Siberia. Of all their clans, the Baldies are the bravest. the Baldies have been hunters and fishermen for the past, well, since Stone Age. But there is a legend that the Baldies also were extremely belligerent, that they were waging war all the time and just wouldn't let go until one day, just like that, they stopped waging war. And this story is how that came about. The Baldies were steeped in their own tradition of warfare and fighting. And they were fighting so much that they really couldn't give up anymore. It interfered with all their other activities, but still, they did not want to stop. And then one day, twins got born in the Baldi clan, and everybody rejoiced because they knew twins signify good luck. And sure enough, the twins, who were named Chubak and Udago, grew up to become prophets. They could tell prophecies, and they used that ability because, unfortunately, they found themselves many times in the clan with no other males around. All the males had gone off to war with the men, and the twins were the only ones remaining there. Well, they grew up. And then one day, the clan came back from waging yet another war, and they had barely entered the village, or there were signs and shouts that another war was pending. What had happened was that the neighboring clan of the Zaxulis had stolen a weasel out of the Baldi traps, and that was an offense. The women heard that there was talk of a new war, and they ran to the twins and said, "Please stop this war. The theft of a weasel is not going to war over." Chubak was standing there with a warrior's bow in his hands, and he explained that if somebody from the Zaxuli clan had stolen a sable from a trap, that would be one thing. Because, you know, a sable is a valuable animal. And perhaps the warrior, the Zaxuli warrior, had needed money for clothes or for food. And we could forgive him because we will always help a poor man. But a weasel has no value whatsoever. So the Zaxulis must have done that to taunt us, to insult us, and to tell us that we are not worth anything. So we are going to take revenge, and we are going to teach them a lesson they will never forget. But while he was talking, he cast a knowing glance at his brother. And Udago continued, "Yes, we will teach them a lesson. But we also must make a promise that once we are in Zaxuli territory, we will not take any of their food or water. Only our own stuff is good enough for us." Well, the women saw that there was no arguing with the men at this point, so they started making food. They baked cakes, they dried fish, they prepared daylily roots, and they prepared meat. And then they took all those supplies and they loaded them on their backs, and they put pitchers of water around their necks, and now they were heavily loaded and off, ready to go to war. This was heavy. This was no fun. This was not ordinary war fighting. And as they were going on their way, they started panting pretty soon. And they got more and more furious on those Zaxulis who made them go to war and also made them carry all those heavy supplies. Well, the Beldies crossed 3 rivers and they crossed 9 lakes, and then they were in Zaxuli territory. They saw some women picking lingonberries, and Chubak called out to them and said, "You'd better go home and tell your menfolk that we are out here. We are coming to take revenge. We won't leave a single person alive. You will find out what it means to deal with us." The women ran off, notifying their husbands and other males in the tribe. And the Beldies went to the village, surrounded the village, and settled in the tall grass around it. In the meantime, the women had warned their men and other males in the clan, and they all had taken refuge in the houses because there was nowhere else to go. But now the women came out with their clubs and they were poking in the grass, and the Beldies, just for safety's sake, withdrew a little bit so that the women would not see them, because they had learned that you will never touch a woman, and you certainly are not going to hit them. And so the Beldies were sitting outside, the Zaxulis were sitting inside, just not doing anything. The Beldies watching that the Zaxulis would not go off hunting and fishing, but they couldn't do much themselves. And as long as the Beldies had enough water and food, they were very brave. But then after a while, they ran out of food. Now, they still stayed in position, but they didn't like it quite as much. "Just wait a little while longer," Chubak said, "and then the clan, the other ones, will die of fright. The Zaxulis will." But then the Beldies ran out of water. And they were liking this less and less. They were now getting as thin as a bear in spring. They were hungry. They were feeling so weak that they could barely hang on to their spears. "Just one more day," Udago said, "and then we will attack all the men in the village." But the next day, the Beldies had run out of patience. They didn't care for this at all. They didn't like this war. This was not what they had signed up for. They had only one thought. They wanted to go home and eat and drink. In the meantime, the Zaxulis were just as bad off in their homes. And so they sent an old man as a negotiator. And he was carrying a carved stick, carved with a human face. And he walked over to the twins and said, can't we have peace?" And the twins said, "That was a grave offense you committed. You will have to pay a very large fine." "But we are poor people. We can't afford any money." "Oh, such a large fine," Udago said. "You will pay us a spear and a pot and a kerchief to wipe off the shame." The Beldies could not believe their ears. This was a large fine? This is what they had waged war for? Hell no, they didn't want this any longer. They wanted to go home, nothing else mattered. The Saxulis, of course, paid the ransom, little as it was, right away, thinking that they were getting off cheaply. And in addition, they brought two beautiful young women to the twins as future brides, thinking that if the clans were related, they would not wage war on each other any longer. The Beldies took the women and they ran home. They never ran so fast. And when they came home in their own village, the women noticed that they were not dragging the usual array of bodies and wounded people behind them. And they said, "How was the war?" "Oh, terrible, terrible, the worst one ever. We don't want to talk about it." And then the men ate and drank for 3 days straight. But since that time, the Beldies have no longer waged war on their relatives. But it took them a couple of generations before they were even able to talk about it and see that as a good thing. Thank you.
Mm. Oh, thank you. Good old stories. This has been a really breadth of a night. And we have one more storyteller tonight, and that is David Tarvin of the Sacramento Storytellers Guild, joining us from Auburn, California tonight. Now, David was called to be a storyteller after a workshop at the Auburn Storytelling Festival many years ago, and he tells me that he has been a storyteller for asterisk years, and I'm not sure if that was a mistype of shift 8 or just asterisks, but I really like asterisk years. There's a lot of opportunity there. So please help me in welcoming our last storyteller of the evening, David Tarvin.
Well, thank you. Legends, living legends. I met my first living legend when I was 6 years old. I lived in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California, and I was out on the street one day in my neighborhood, and this car drove by and then it stopped, and it was an actor. He had just moved in one street over. He was a famous actor. He was the co-star of my favorite TV show, The Lone Ranger. And in that car sat Tonto himself. And every once in a while, when I'd see him, he would always stop and we'd talk for a while. When I was 9 years old, I was going up an escalator at Macy's when I looked up and I saw one of the greatest living legends, the man, John Wayne. And as he came down the escalator, I guess I was just in total shock. He looked at me and our eyes met. He reached up, grabbed his hat, and he said, "Pard." And then I watched him as he went down the escalator and disappeared into Macy's. But when I was 19, that's when I met one of the greatest living legends, the most famous, awesome, ferocious, stupendous living legends. And it all started one day when I was at work. Now, I worked in a little mine up in the hills in the gold country, actually up in the mountains. And I drove a dump truck. And on this particular day, it was my first load. I would take that dump truck, go up the mountain, down the mountain to Sacramento and dump it and come back, do that all day long. Well, dump truck was loaded up. I was climbing up that hill and I was almost to the top. I was just coming up to break bone turn when suddenly the engine began to sputter, and then all of a sudden it just died right there. I jumped on the brakes. I just sat there on that incline for a moment. And then I started to smell smoke. And then I heard a bang that the brakes just blew, those lines blew. And that dump truck started rolling back down that mountain road. And it went faster and faster and faster, picking up more speed. And I was frantic. I was looking in the mirror trying to steer. Well, wasn't that easy. And I almost made it halfway down the hill, but there was this slight curve. And when I hit it, that dump truck, it just jumped that curve. And I went straight down the side of that mountain. Now I was really panicking, trying to steer and miss bushes and trees. And I did pretty good till I got about halfway down the mountain. And then all of a sudden, there was just all I knew was there was this huge tree. And bam, that truck hit it. Now that dump truck loaded was 37 tons. And it hit this giant sequoia tree. And when it did, it just shook. And then it shaked. And then it trembled. And while it was doing that, there was this horrid noise. All these things kept falling out of the tree, these leaves and whatever, and it was just pelting the truck. And then all of a sudden, from high up in the treetop, I could hear this sound. This was like a whooshing sound. It just got louder and louder and louder, and then boom, just like that. Something fell into that truck. And then it was silent. Well, I was more than curious, to say the least. And so I opened that truck door and I stepped out on this little tiny step right outside the door so that you could look into the truck bed. And I peeked back there. In the back of that truck was this huge mass of black fur. I mean, huge. And it stunk. I mean, I got a whiff of that and almost threw up. I mean, it stunk. And as I watched it, it started to move a little bit. Now, I couldn't believe that. And as I watched it, it started to really move around. And then it started to rise up. And it got up, up, up. It had arms, and the arms reached up, and they reached up towards the sky, and it stood tall like a bear. It was 9 feet tall, 800 pounds. Was a Bigfoot with dark red fiery eyes. And when it saw me looking at it, it leaned forward, threw out his arms towards me, and roared at me. Wow. It scared the heck out of me. I mean, it scares me now. I fell out of the truck and I hit that mountain and I started rolling down the mountain. Well, after a while, I got my footing, and I don't know what happened, but Bigfoot was mad and he was chasing me. Well, when I got my footing, I ran and I ran and I ran. I ran as fast as I could down the side of that mountain, praying that Bigfoot wouldn't be able to catch up to me. But I could hear him. I could hear him coming down that mountain right after me. After a while, I got down to the bottom of that mountain and I burst out of the forest, and there was the American River. I ran to the river, I dove into the river, I swam across, and when I got to the other side, I got out and I turned around and looked back towards the forest to see if Bigfoot was still following me. Sure enough, he was. Pretty soon, boom, he comes flying out of the forest. And he's running down towards that river, and all of a sudden he throws his arms out and he starts wheeling like this, and he tried to stop himself from going into the water. But he was big and he was going fast and he couldn't stop himself. And the next thing you know, Bigfoot went head first into that river. Well, I started to run, but then Bigfoot started screaming. He was screaming and yelling and flailing around in the water, and I turned and I watched him, and I thought, what is he doing? He's panicked. He's screaming and yelling. That's when I realized Bigfoot doesn't know how to swim. Well, I was afraid, but something in me just said, go help him. And so I dove back into the river. I swam out to Bigfoot. I dove down underneath him, and I grabbed that enormous calf, the calf of his leg. And I started to pull and pull and pull and pull. And then I pushed and I pushed and I pushed till I forced his foot to touch the bottom of the river. And as soon as I did that, Bigfoot just stood up. All 9 feet of him. You see, it was summertime, the river was low, and it was only 4 foot deep. Well, so there I was, across from Bigfoot, 9 foot, 5'10". I started to panic a little bit, and Bigfoot was looking at me. He's looking me in the eyes, I'm looking at him. And then suddenly, a big smile broke out across his face, and he reached out with his arms and he threw them around me, and he gave me this big hug, and he started squeezing, and I started yelling because that was a pretty powerful hug. Well, when I started screaming, he let me go. We just stood there for a minute, looking at each other. We both smiled, and he turned, he walked out of that river. He walked up to the forest line, and then just before he went into the tree line, he turned, put up his hand, and he waved to me. And then he disappeared into the forest. Well, that was the time that I met the greatest living legend. And I know it sounds funny, but every time I drive by that forest on Highway 49, I kind of feel his eyes on me. When I do, I lean out that window a little bit, put up my hand, and I wave to the famous legend.
Oh. Oh, what a fun way to bring us home. Another Bigfoot story, but a different tenor. Oh, that was a lovely way to wrap up the evening. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I would like to ask each of our tellers to come up and join me here on stage, as it were. Thank you so very much, Pakrati. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to Pakrati for doing the tech and making all this work seamlessly. And I, again, would like to thank all of our tellers, Marty and Aunt Leanne and Adrian and Michael and David and Peter and the other David. Thank you all. So a round of applause for everyone here. And does anyone have anything that they have coming up that I'm happy to throw some links here in the chat. If you have any work coming up or shows, or I'm going to put the link to David's book there in the chat as well. Does anybody, any of the tellers have anything that they want to shout out here? Yeah, Marty.
I think I sent this to you, but late.
Yeah. If
Sorry,
you want to talk
I'm
about
going
it,
to
though.
gallery. Oh, okay. So this Friday, Seattle Storytellers Guild is having I think it's our 4th Liars Fest. I'm the MC, and we have Bruce Marcus as our featured teller. He'll be telling first. And Saturday, the next day, Bruce is doing a workshop, and I hope I don't have to know what's called Once Upon a Happy Ever After, Alternate Story Structures. And again, it's sponsored by Seattle Storytellers Guild. And it's $15 for members, and I think $20 for non-members. Anne can help me there, maybe. Hi, Anne. And I forgot to mention, but every fourth Monday of the month, I have a Little Liars group. And if anybody would like to join us, we're just there to practice telling tall tales. And sometimes it's not necessarily a tall tale, but we're just there to practice and give feedback. So it's the fourth Mondays of the month, 6 o'clock Pacific time. And you can email me if you want to get a reminder and the link to join us. I think that's all. I'll put my email in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Marty.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else have anything else they want to shout out? David? And then Aunt Leanne, I see there.
Yeah, Cooper, thank you for putting the link to my book in that book. That's the most recent book of my series of Southern California, mostly ghost stories and legends. And you can read about the Proctor Valley Monster in there. And I'm currently writing a book all about the Proctor Valley Monster, origins of that legend in Chula Vista. That'll be out in the summer. And if you're in Southern California, if you're anywhere near Southern San Diego, you can feel free to follow Storytellers of San Diego. We'll be posting the specifics throughout fall, September, and October of many different performances open to the public. Many are in schools, but there will also be performances in Chula Vista in museums and libraries of these legends of Proctor Valley. It has an unusual amount of legends, ghost stories, vanishing hitchhikers, UFOs. All those stories are part of that region's local lore that people tell each other. So if you're in the neighborhood in the fall Halloween season, follow Storytellers of San Diego to keep abreast of the dates, but there'll be multiple performances and hopefully a final performance in Proctor Valley itself in the evening time in the monster's own habitat.
Nice. Nice.
And I'll put my website to follow me for news on that book of Proctor Valley monster stories. It'll come out in the summer.
Awesome. That sounds great. Aunt Leanne,
Cool.
did you have something you want to?
I do. So thanks, David. I put storytellersofsandiego.org in the chat. We've got a few other things coming up before then as well. So the first weekend in June, if you're down here, we'll be telling at the Sam Hinton Festival, which is also a folk music festival put on by the San Diego Folk Heritage folks in Poway. And then the end of June, we do a kickoff concert for the San Diego area Highland Games right here in Vista, where I live, at Brengle Terrace Park. And so that's the last weekend in June, the Friday night, last full weekend in June, which I think is, yes, the 28th, it looks like. And we also in Julian are going to be part of the Apple Festival this year out in Julian in September. We will be doing an Apple themed storytelling. It's the first time we're doing that festival. So we've got lots of stuff coming up. And I also put in asap.com because I will be teaching a storytelling class online through the Armed Services Arts Partnership in June, on Tuesday, June 11th. And you can go to their website if you are a spouse, a child, a brother or sister or relative of anyone who has served in any of the armed services, or if you yourself are current, retired, or veteran, or come and check it out. And all of those classes are free through asap.org.
Love it. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I think that wraps